Another year has passed and a new October has arrived. The 2023 MLB postseason starts tomorrow, and I'm predicting every single matchup and the number of games it goes, the winner, the World Series MVP, all right here in this video. This year definitely looms on the weird side of postseason brackets, teams involved. Honestly, the weirdest year that we've had in recent memory. Everything about the year 2023 is weird to me, at least. We got the Marlins and the D-backs both in a real postseason in the National League. What is life? And then in the American League side, you got the rise of the Baltimore Orioles owning the number one seed. What am I even talking about, bro? Life as I've known it for the past several years has been the Orioles being this team that I wish was good, but unfortunately they're just this horrendous team year after year. Well, wake up. Those days are gone, my friends. The Orioles are the number one seed in the American League. They just won 101 games. 2023 was always this Astros down year coming off the 2022 huge year with the World Series title, but now suddenly it is another year of an ALDS Game 1 coming your way from Houston, Texas as the number 2 seed. The division may have been snatched, but the Rangers are still back. The Blue Jays and the Rays are involved. The Yankees and Red Sox are not. The Braves and Dodgers being the top 2 seeds in the National League gives us some normality. That's kind of what the past half decade has been all about in the National League. Meanwhile, the city of Philadelphia is ready to roll for year 2 of Red October. So let's get started predicting each series. We'll do the Rangers and the Rays first, since that's the first game coming up tomorrow afternoon at 3 Eastern Time on ABC. When I was filling out my official bracket last night, I actually predicted the whole National League before even touching this series because I was so unsure. But ultimately, I went with the Tampa Bay Rays to win this series in 3 games. It's interesting because the Rays are home. They're definitely the favorites in this series, but you look at the Texas Rangers and they have more star players than Tampa Bay. The Scherzer loss definitely hurts the Rangers pitching for this series. They still got Nathan Eovaldi and the underrated Jordan Montgomery. And then if it goes a third game, you're talking about either John Gray or Dane Dunning. Meanwhile, for Tampa, up until the last week or so, I've been pretty down on Tampa because of not having McClanahan or the underrated Rasmussen or Jeffrey Springs for this year's playoffs, along with not having Wander Franco. However, Tampa has played well, and they have 3 guys that they could throw in a wild card series. Glasnow and Eflin has been a nice duo at the top of that rotation for a while, and they have Aaron Savali to pitch that third game, the deadline acquisition from Cleveland. And the Rays can hit up and down. This year we saw the breakout of Isaac Paredes. Randy Arozarena in October is a different animal. Yandy Diaz had a career year. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the deepest lineup. You still got guys who can be productive like Josh Lau and Brandon Lau. I really like the Rays because of their home field advantage and because they went into the playoffs on a good note, winning 99 games. Meanwhile, Texas thought they had the division locked up. A terrible final week of the year for the Rangers. So I think the momentum already in Tampa's favor, along with the fact that they're going to be at the Trop, which comes to life in the fall. Randy Arozarena in the fall is just absolutely a monster. I think the Rays are going to get this done. But because pure talent-wise, you can make the case that the Rangers are the better team, I'm going to go with 3 games for the Rays. I'm going to say it goes to a third game. Again, wouldn't be surprised if it's 2 for any of these series, really, but for this particular series, I'm going to say 3. Then we go to the Blue Jays and the Twins series in Minnesota. I'm going to go with the Toronto Blue Jays to win this series in 2 games. I was surprised. I took a look at FanDuel, and the odds for this series are actually pretty even. It's pretty much a 50-50, but I'm going to take the Blue Jays, and I'm going to say 2 games. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Minnesota breaks that drought of not winning a playoff game since 2004, but if they lose 2 straight, then they fall to 0-20 in their last 20 playoff games, which I want to see that. That would be very funny. But I'm high on the Toronto Blue Jays. I've been talking about this. I think you can actually make a case that they're the best team in the American League. I think you can make a case that any team involved in the American League playoffs, aside from the Minnesota Twins, is the best team in the American League. You can make a case for all the other 5. Astros, Rays, Orioles, Blue Jays, Rangers. Like, you can make a case for any one of them. I think the Blue Jays lineup is better than the numbers they put up in the regular season. I'm particularly talking about Vlad Guerrero and George Springer. Those guys are better players than their numbers suggested this year. I imagine the 3 guys that the Blue Jays will put on the mound this series will be Gausman, Barrios, and Bassett. Hyun-Jin Ryu is back, though, and he's been pitching well ever since he got back. And then Yusei Kikuchi also had a much better year this year than he did last year. Now over to the National League side, I'm going to talk about the D-backs and the Milwaukee Brewers. And I'm going to go with the Milwaukee Brewers in just 2 games. Now, I've been very down on the Brewers lineup. I think it's the worst lineup in the postseason for sure. It's one of the worst lineups in all of baseball. All right, maybe that's a little bit of a stretch, but it's a bottom 10 lineup in Major League Baseball. I do believe that. But I think at home, with more playoff experience than Arizona, and with a short series, you get Burns, you get Woodruff. If you have a Game 3, you got Peralta. I am so confident in the Brewers' ability to take Game 1 with Burns on the mound against someone who's not Gallen, because I imagine Gallen's pitching Game 2 because he can't pitch Game 1 on normal rest. They threw him on Friday night. And they pitched Merrill Kelly on Saturday night, I believe. So the D-backs are probably starting Brandon Paft in Game 1, unless they do go the short rest route with Gallen in Game 1. If you're Arizona, I think you actually play this in a way that you just hope for a miracle in Game 1, Paft versus Burns, and then if you somehow win that, you're in great shape with Gallen and Kelly lined up for Games 2 and 3. If you lose, you're like, all right, we're down 1-0. We weren't even supposed to win the series, but now we got our top 2 dogs ready for Games 2 and 3. The D-backs were kind of trying to lose so that they can fall to the 6th seed. Like I said many times throughout the 2022 and 23 season, that teams were going to be trying to fall to the 6 because of how the format is designed. The 6 seed is way better than the 5 seed. The lowest division winner, like the Brewers, is always going to be a worse baseball team than the 4 seed, the top wild card, like the Phillies. That applies to the National League here, but it applies way more to the American League. You obviously rather be the 6 seed like the Blue Jays, having to only travel to Minnesota, whereas the number 5 seed, the Rangers, have to go to Tropicana Field to play the Rays. But anyway, Brewers in 2. I just don't think the D-backs are quite postseason ready, or honestly even postseason caliber. It's an interesting matchup, though. They faced off in the playoffs back in the 2011 NLDS. The Brewers walked it off in Game 5 to move on. They got the series in the night games, ESPN2 evening games in Milwaukee. It'll be pretty fun. They should have done the Phillies games at 7 Eastern and the Brewers games at 8:30 Eastern. Instead, it's the Brewers games at 7 Eastern, Phillies at 8 Eastern. Anyway, let's talk about the Marlins and Phillies series. And I got the Phillies winning this one in 2 games. I do only have 1 Game 3 this year. We had 1 Game 3 last year. But hey, chances are we have about 2 Game 3s. That's probably what's average here. But I do have the Phillies in 2 games. The Marlins in the playoffs without Sandy Alcantara just kind of seems prone for disaster. I think that they're absolutely really energetic about going to the playoffs. I saw their celebration. Like, it seems pretty intimidating, but ultimately, guys with no playoff experience heading into Philadelphia in the month of October, the Phillies, the more talented baseball team, the more postseason experienced team, a whole lot of pedigree on that Phillies side after last year. And ultimately, the better pitchers as well. You got Zach Wheeler ready for Game 1 against Jesus Luzardo. Phils will have Aaron Nola ready for Game 2. If it goes to a third game, you got options. You got Christopher Sanchez, who's been throwing the ball well, Ranger Suarez, Taijuan Walker, Michael Lorenzen. There's plenty of options. Those guys can also be big factors out of relief as well if the Phillies need a long relief arm, which teams tend to need in the playoffs. So on to the ALDS. The Rays taking on the Orioles, the top 2 record teams in the American League. 99 win Rays, 101 win Orioles, facing off in the 4-1 division series. And I'm going to go with the Tampa Bay Rays in 5 games, winning a Game 5 in Baltimore. Now, I'm going to be rooting passionately for the O's against whoever they play throughout the whole postseason. But this ALDS Game 5 on a Friday night in Baltimore, I'll be rooting for the O's like never before. But when it comes to playoff time, I kind of like the Rays more than I like the Orioles. Now, it can go either way. Absolutely, I struggled to pick this one. But give me Tampa Bay in 5. I think Baltimore is a deeper lineup, but I don't think their lineup is as good as Tampa's at the top. And I definitely like the Rays pitching staff more than the O's pitching staff. Especially the Rays bullpen over the Orioles bullpen, with Felix Bautista being out of the mix for Baltimore and Tampa just unleashing good arm after good arm every single year. Now, the other ALDS is also a fantastic matchup, the Toronto Blue Jays against the Houston Astros. I'm going to go with the Astros in 4 games, closing it out on the road. However, I can definitely see this going the max, or I could even see Toronto winning this series because ultimately they're pretty close in talent. But the pedigree of the Astros, the fact that they're going in the playoffs with a lot of momentum, another ALDS starting in Houston, it's so tradition, and it's so tradition for them to win the ALDS. But if they don't go to the World Series, I think the most likely route of their elimination might be to lose the ALDS to Toronto, but I'm going to go with Houston. Now in the National League Division Series, we got the Phillies taking on the Braves in a marquee matchup that I've had my eye on for months, ever since it's been clear that the Phillies would be the top wild card and the Braves would be the top seed. A rematch from last year, but this time both teams look even better. I struggled a lot picking this one, I seriously did. I think these are absolutely the 2 best teams in the National League. I went with the Atlanta Braves in 5 games, though. They have been the absolute best team in baseball all summer long. They won the division over Philadelphia by 14 games. Now, I'm very high on the Phillies lineup depth. I think people sleep on how the Phillies can just bring up good hitter after good hitter very deep in the lineup. but I think the Braves do that to an even greater extent. I think the bullpens are pretty even. Both are above average but not lethal. And I would give the Braves a small advantage in the starting rotation. Their rotation is obviously front-headed by Max Fried. I think this thing goes to a Game 5 in Atlanta, and I like the Braves in this particular season to get the job done. Then we move on to a Brewers-Dodgers National League Division Series, the 3 versus the 2 in the NL. And I went with the Los Angeles Dodgers in 5 games, alright? I think the Brewers lineup is terrible, but I think the Dodgers rotation is terrible. How can people act like this is a year where the Dodgers are primed to make a deep run when their only man in the rotation is Clayton Kershaw? He's been fantastic, hasn't quite been fantastic in the playoffs throughout his career though. But even if he is fantastic, you're talking about their other arms being Bobby Miller, Lance Lynn, and who even knows for Game 4. I just really don't see the Dodgers making it to the World Series this year, but against the Milwaukee Brewers, because their lineup is tremendously better than Milwaukee's, I will go with the Dodgers. I do think it goes 5 though, because when I look at that Brewers rotation up against that Dodgers rotation, I think the Brewers have a chance to contend in this series. Now on to the American League Championship Series, where I have ALCS Game 1 coming at you from Houston. I have the Astros making an unprecedented 7th straight ALCS, and it's against the Tampa Bay Rays this year. I'm going to go with the Astros to win the pennant at home in a Game 6. If you truly evaluate it, there's no way you can say the Astros are not the best team in the American League. The odds suggest that as well. They're pretty clear favorites to win the pennant. Now, that would not have been the case just a couple of days ago when it was looking like their playoffs were going to have to start on the road in the Wild Card Series. The journey would have been a lot tougher, but now it's just a typical Astros road to the World Series. In the NLCS, I have it being a Dodgers and Braves year. 3rd time in 4 years if this happens. And I got the Atlanta Braves winning it in just 5 games. I already said what I needed to say about both of these teams when I talked about their NLDS matchup, so clearly I don't think that the Dodgers match up very strongly with the Atlanta Braves. I think the Braves are going to make it to the World Series. I think if they get the Dodgers in the LCS, I think they're going to just cruise right by them. I think the Braves are going to go back to the World Series. I think that if they face off with the Dodgers in the playoffs, that the Braves will cruise by them in 2023. And I think if the Braves somehow don't make the World Series, it will be the Philadelphia Phillies who upset them. So I've been talking about this as my World Series prediction for really 2 months ever since the Astros got Verlander back. Astros and the Braves, 2023, a rematch from 2021. And I've been pretty firm on what I see happening in this series as well, and that's the Atlanta Braves in 6 games once again, but this time around, it's a Game 6 in Atlanta where they close it out. Last year, the Astros closed out the World Series at home in a Game 6, and I just realized that was the first time that a team won the World Series on their home field since the 2013 Red Sox. But yeah, the Braves are even better than the Astros are. The Astros are the best in a wide-open AL, that there's a lot of competitive, close teams at the top, whereas the Braves are the reason that the NL is not wide open. The Braves are the favorite because they're the best, and this video was not one of those totally upset bracket predictions just for the views or anything. This was my true prediction for the 2023 playoffs. I hope the O's go further than I had them going, but ultimately this is exactly what I see happening. This is my A bracket. I'm going to probably make some more just for the fun of it, but this is my top bracket for the 2023 postseason. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel because we have a lot of playoff content coming this month. Follow me on TikTok as well. I'll leave the username in the description for you. Follow the Instagram as well. That'll also be in the description. Enjoy the postseason, my friends.